Hey y'all, welcome back. I hope that you had some time to practice the last segment, as we will really be using mentalizing in this segment, okay? In this segment, it will be important for us to really go deep with our journals, with ourselves, about repairing our assumptive worldview. The reality is, when losses, like traumatic, violent losses happen, like suicide loss, messes with the way that we see the world, how we have seen ourselves in the world and our loved ones in the world, what's possible, what's impossible, pain, suffering, what we're capable of as people, right? And so that could be very difficult to live in, very unsettling. And so before we dive into some practices, let's talk a little bit about the nature of suicide. Suicide is it's a hard phenomena to wrap our minds around for most of us still to this day, and even harder to talk about. So I'm going to offer you a view of suicide that is a little more trauma informed, and you can take what is helpful from this and use it, and what's not helpful, just throw it away. Okay? So one way to look at suicide is when your brain experiences incredible distress, especially in childhood trauma, childhood abuse, combat, natural disasters, or brain injury. It has a tendency to create defense mechanisms for dealing with this traumatic stress. So one of these mechanisms is called a suicidal part. So think of suicidal parts as these kind of protectors of ours, right? And they are activated when the brain system feels under extreme threat. This threat could be real or it could be perceived. I can assess threat even if there is no threat, right? So when loved ones are triggered by external experiences that activate traumatic implicit memories, which means that the implicit means the memory is felt sense and still. And so felt sense means that we will feel the memory, but it doesn't always turn into or translate into a factual picture or knowledge. It just can feel like I am in that sense of threat in this moment, right? So when that happens, at the same time, protective and defensive parts can also be activated to protect us from whatever this threat we are assessing and experiencing, okay? And so essentially what the suicidal part is saying, imagine like a protector, right? Saying, hey, don't worry. You don't have to feel this pain anymore. I will help you get rid of it. I'll create a strategy for us to get out, right? And that strategy is usually to take out the pain. And unfortunately, it takes out the entire person, right? And so now, this is very important. It is much more complex than this, right? Suicidality is not causational, it's correlational. So a good way that I've learned to look at suicide is through the lens of a perfect storm. So many different things are happening, and they create this perfect storm in life where our loved one, inevitably the suicidal part just takes the lead, and it creates the strategy out of the perfect storm. And unfortunately, ultimately, that strategy takes the life of our loved one. This is very complex. And so my hope is that this little way of looking at it can help you, and can help you imagine what this would look like. But ultimately, there's a lot we don't know about suicidality. And so as one author taught me, we can try on the shoes of our loved one, and we can imagine what it was like to be in their shoes in this perfect storm. But then we want to take off the shoes. Okay, we don't want to keep the shoes on. Because ultimately, We want to respect the life story of our loved one, and respect that it has its own honorable narrative. Okay. So from here, let's just kind of take some time to focus on a few questions. I want you to, after you hear the questions, I want you to pause the video and just take some time to reflect, write out in your journals. So what comes up for you? So here are some questions. Why did my loved one choose to take their life? What comes up for you when you ask that question? Who is responsible? What comes up for you when you ask that question? How do you experience guilt? Are you experiencing any guilt? And so if these questions do not feel relevant to you, then just put them to the side. I would highly recommend that, if possible, you discuss these with safe loved ones who are going through this video with you, through these segments with you, so that they kind of can track with, the purpose here, or with your therapist. Ultimately, what we want to do is name where we are at and name what we think is going on, so that we can then shift it in let's just say, clean up the narrative with facts in order to move forward. So the practice of this segment is really going to focus on taking some quiet time to sit down and write a factual and bearable narrative of our loved one's death. So what I want you to do is mentalize and maybe imagine, from the point of view of your loved one, the story of why they took their life. So what are as many facts as you can use? I understand that this may be difficult and triggering, and so I would highly recommend that you do this with your therapist, or make sure that you have safe and supportive people around you that you can reach out to, and definitely practice staying in a regulated body. So the point of this exercise is to put on and then take off the shoes of your loved one. So you can mentalize from their point of view. Okay, like, I can see why you did what you did. I may not be happy about it. I may not have been okay about it. I may still have my thoughts and emotions and judgments and fears and perspectives about it, but I can at least see what happened for you, and then I'm going to take that off. This is your story, right? And so if you need to go back to the last segment to practice, learn about mentalizing and practice, please do that. This is important here. You want to be able to very much so imagine putting on the shoes of your loved one and taking them off. Okay? And so after you're done with this exercise, I want you to take some time to ask yourself some deeper existential questions. So for example, have your spiritual or religious views changed in light of this loss? If so, how? What about them has changed? Where do you feel like you've grown, and where do you feel like you've been set back, or where do you feel like you don't have a good footing? Write that down. What are some questions you may be struggling with on a spiritual or existential level? How do you think about death and life now? Ask yourself these questions and write them out. Share them with your loved ones. Have a discussion. Again, a reminder, make sure when you do share this with your loved ones, it's from a place of discussion and space and mentalizing, and not from a place of giving each other advice or rescuing or, judgment and so on. So take time to review this segment if you need to. And now you can pause this, refer to your workbooks, and take some time to see to process that. And I will see you in the next segment.